On the last video, we gave you 10 tips to dominate League of Legends on DraftKings. Now we're going to talk about the top 3 mistakes, and we're starting right now. What's up, guys? Joe Holka here. Welcome to another daily fantasy sports and betting video. If this is your first time here and you want to become a profitable DraftKings player and get better at betting, start now by subscribing to the channel. Make sure you click that notification bell so you don't miss anything along the way. But if you're already a Holkamaniac, you know what to do. Smash that like button and we'll get rolling. The first mistake that people make when they're playing League of Legends on DraftKings is that they don't realize that everyone's getting assists, so you really don't have to prioritize individual skill. 3 biggest esports mistakes you can make and how to avoid them. Your first mistake is prioritizing individual skill. So I would assume that's somewhat similar to what you're just talking about. So how would you kind of correlate to that? So like a LeBron James type figure in NBA.
So I should have mentioned this when we were talking about the scoring earlier. The thing that makes League different from all the other games, I'll put it in a basketball analogy because it's easy to understand. Imagine if any time that anybody on the Lakers scored a basket, everybody else on the team got an assist.
Yeah.
So that makes it so it's not that important to have LeBron, who's going to score the 30 points, because Jake Hart is going to get 30 assists.
If you do any damage to them, you get an assist type thing?
Yeah, and when the team fighting phase comes, which is when the majority of the kills happen, the whole team will be there usually. Okay. And so even a kill is worth 3 points and an assist is worth 2, so the difference just isn't that big. It's more important to have as many players as possible from the team that's going to get the most kills. It doesn't really necessarily matter. Like, you don't want to do in League of Legends what you would do in another sport where you go like, I'm going to take the guy that's going to score the most from the Lakers, the guy that's going to score the most from, you know, this team and that team and this team. You want to have 4 guys from the Lakers. If you think they're going to score 140 points, you want all the guys from the Lakers.
The second mistake that players make when playing League of Legends on DraftKings is not stacking and really just diversifying too much, because a lot of the points are coming from getting the win. And like I said in the last tip, basically you really need to get those assists.
Yeah, the biggest mistake that you'll see people make is putting 4 or 5 teams on their lineup, like players from 4 or 5 different teams. For the most part, you should be playing players from 2 teams in every lineup. The only times that is not true is if you can't afford it. That's basically the only time it's not true. If you have 2 teams that you really think are the best 2 teams and you can't afford to have players from just those teams, you might have to throw away a spot, as we call it, put a guy that you think is going to lose, but you just can't afford to not have a loser on your team somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
But for the most part, you should be rostering players from 2 teams, and you'll see a lot of people that they'll go with like name recognition, and they'll say, oh, well, the mid laner from this team is really good, and the AD carry from the other team that he's playing against is really good. I'll take both of those guys. But whichever team wins is going to score significantly more points than the team that loses. So it doesn't matter how good your guy is. League games are not like basketball games where it'll be like 140 to 138. They end up being the equivalent of like 140 to 75.
Got it. So
you don't want anybody from that. Yeah, you don't want anybody from that team that's scoring 75 points if you can help it.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of what you're saying, if you kind of just pick and choose like the way you think are the best players on like a lot of different teams, it's just going to lower your ceiling in general if you don't hit on every single one of those games, right? So like, how many games are even happening per slate typically if you do have that many options?
It's between 2 and 5.
Okay.
The biggest slates we ever really have are usually 5 games. I think there's been a couple 6ers, but 5 games is usually the biggest they get. And there are slates that only have 2 games. The ones that only have 2 games are the ones where you might end up having to roster a losing player in there, or a guy that you know is going to lose, just because if there's 2 huge favorites and you think they're both going to win, you're not going to be able to afford to fill your lineups with only guys from those teams.
There we go, man. That's perfect. A perfect transition into Buddha's question. So what you were saying in your article is you're talking about like rostering players on winning teams is super important. So stacking in general. But Buddha was asking, is there any merit to rostering a team and in the captain spot and stacking that team as well? I'd assume that answer is yes.
So if there is, if you need to for the sake of money, that's a fine idea. But what I would say is, teams have a like set maximum that they can score. They only get a point. They only get points for a certain number of things. And the most points you can basically get from a team in a game is about 25 points.
Okay.
Whereas players have caps that can go up to 50 or 60 points if they have a really huge game. So if you think that a team, let's say you think Invictus Gaming is going to get the most kills today, I would advise against playing their team if you can help it. I would much rather have 4 of their players because the players have a much higher ceiling than the team.
Okay.
So your team, if you're going to play 2 teams today, you think one of them is going to dominate and the other one's going to do all right, just put the all right team in your team slot because the team variance is not that high, whereas the player variance is super high.
I spend a lot of time on these videos for you guys for all these different sports. If you want to support what I'm doing here for free, a great way to do so is by throwing me the follow over on Twitter. And if you're new to the community, I also do a ton of content exclusive only to Instagram. So if you can take a few seconds, make sure you're following me over there as well. Really appreciate it. The third mistake, and this is probably the most important that a lot of people make with League of Legends on DraftKings, is just by playing some of these support players and really not prioritizing their captain spot, guys are going to get a lot of carries and really get a better chance at scoring a ton of DraftKings points.
So this applied more before they changed our format. So They changed how they scored esports DFS recently, and they added the captain spot. They took away our 2 flex positions.
Got it.
It still does apply to some degree, which is if you're going into a bigger slate in particular, like in a 5-game slate, having someone like a support as your captain, a lot of people will say, like, I really think that these 2 teams are going to win. So however I can fit them in my lineup, that's how I want to fit them in. I'll put a support in the captain or something like that. Because of how much that limits your upside, you want as many mids and 80 carries as you can get. At the moment, the maximum of those that you can get is 3. If you can put 1 in the captain, 1 in the mid slot, 1 in the 80 carry slot, then you can get 3 of them. You used to be able to get 4 when we had 2 flex spots. But putting a support in your captain slot on a big slate is almost impossible to win the slate with because League has enough variance that in a 5-game slate, at least one of the underdogs is very likely to get a win. If you take underdog players, you can almost always get 3 carries. And so if it comes down to my lineup that has 280 carries and a mid with 180 carry in the captain slot, and your lineup that has a support in the captain slot, which means you're going to be playing 2 supports, I'm just going to beat you. And so you should really be looking for teams. You should be looking on a bigger slate. You should always be looking for what underdog you think is going to win. If there's 5 games, one of them is going to win.
I love the confidence, man. Like earlier, you're like, yeah, I opened this lineup and it had no chance of beating me. And now you're like, yeah, if you do this, I'm just going to beat you. So I love the confidence, man. That's it. League of Legends on DraftKings. Hope you want to kind of dive in a little bit more to some other sports. If you want to learn how to become a profitable daily fantasy sports player and how to get better at betting, start now by hitting that subscribe icon in the bottom right-hand corner so you don't miss anything. Like I said, there's a ton of DFS courses for basically any sport you can imagine on DraftKings, so definitely check out some of those as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.